So, guys, I want to review the Boondocks, and I want to do the episode Granddad's Fight. And this is considered probably the funniest episode of the Boondocks, where Granddad gets in a fight with this character named Stinkmeaner. And this whole episode's a whole satire on black culture and the black machismo. Like the idea that black men and other African Americans have to fight and act really, really ignorant. And the other thing about this episode was it was very controversial because they say the word nigga like almost like 60 times in this episode. I think it was 54 times. So obviously standards and practices were kind of like concerned, and then also Adult Swim was kind of concerned. But there was a point to like the excessive usage, because during the time in the mid 2000s, if you don't remember, like, that was when 50 Cent and other rappers were coming out that were using the N-word heavily. That's when we watched the Chappelle show, and Dave Chappelle used the N-word heavily on his show. So it was kind of like, white people, Hispanic people, black people were all using like the N-word a lot. So I think it definitely satirizes the excessive usage of that word. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's nigger or nigga, it's still unacceptable. Like as the old saying goes, you don't see two white people calling each other cracker all day. You don't see two Jewish people call each other kike all day. You don't see two Hispanic people call each other spick every single day. The only other group that does that are Italian Americans, because I've seen Italians call each other guineas or goombas or wops, and other things like that. But it seems like, obviously with racial slurs, usually African Americans use that. That's usually like, African Americans use that heavily. Not all African Americans, some people do, but that's kind of more accepted versus other races using other racial slurs or other ethnics even. So it's an interesting like take on that usage. But there's a couple of things in this episode that kind of stand out to me. Like, first of all, like, Huey is a huge hypocrite because he actually encourages Granddad to get into a fight with Stinkmeaner. Like, he trains him, and then he says like a couple of times, you don't need to fight. And then at the very end, when the fight's going on and Granddad has tunnel vision, Huey kind of calls it off. So he kind of goes back and forward a little bit of, if he's teaching his grandfather how to fight, he's actually for the fight. So that's kind of like, not good for his character to be a hypocrite. And that's like a poor usage, because he's somebody with a lot of morals and values, and family's important to him. So it's really weird how he goes back and forth instead of just talking him out of it. And then he also helps Tom go to the boxing commission. So he kind of does like, he goes back and forth. Oh, well, I'm for the fight. Oh, well, I'm against the fight. And that's not good. The other thing that I want to say is that I think that with Granddad and Stinkmeaner, I think it's kind of interesting that they both have a fight, because I think the point of it's also how, sometimes it's not just this generation of African Americans. That's kind of been like that's kind of systematic, and that's also with other groups of people. Like, people talk about how, okay, the founding fathers were sensitive because, if they're going to have a duel and shoot each other over somebody offending somebody else, that is what it is. So I think the metaphor of the older people fighting is kind of saying that that's kind of like a cultural thing where different races are in combat. I mean, different races, different generations are always like fighting over something petty, and that's not very, very unfortunate. I think the other thing that I would say is that I do like the end message too, which is, we all can be rereading a book, because that's also a sign that, people are just using their time unwisely. And then also with what Huey was saying is that, when you're having a public nigga moment in public, it embarrasses the whole race. That's true, because usually when it comes to African Americans, like anytime you see a fight between African Americans or black people act violent and it's caught on camera, there's a lot of just people just using that, or even the media playing those images a lot to kind of create the stereotype that that's how all black people are. So it's really unfortunate how, like I said, if there's two white kids having a fight, there's two Asian kids having a fight, if there's two Hispanic kids having a fight, you know, it's a big deal, but people let it go. But if it's two black people having a fight with each other, then people like kind of get into their racism. Like, oh, well, that's how all black people are. They're violent and they're not rational. They're not a rational race. So it's kind of really unfortunate. And I also think that the whole metaphor of Riley throwing the chair is kind of like saying that, well, this is always going to go on forever of people being ignorant and jumping into violence, unnecessarily. People can be so easily triggered to be violent and reckless, so that's kind of the metaphor of him throwing the chair. And then also him selling tickets. There's bum fights and there's social media, even like also with all the news channels reporting it. That's also kind of like a proto to social media, or the news kind of highlighting ridiculous things. But to go back to Riley, that when he's selling tickets, that's just an idea of how black people exploit other black people. There's like fights or whatever going on. Sometimes there is a situation where people are selling tickets to it. There is like people taking pit bulls and getting pit bulls to fight each other. So there is a sense of exploiting your own race, when you should be kind of like understanding that everybody, that part of being alive is also understanding that people like you go through the same struggle, so why can't you add to the struggle? So it's definitely Riley just really shows the exploitation. I think Huey shows the hypocrisy that you can be for two people not fighting each other ignorantly, but there is a lot of hypocrisy. And Granddad and Stinkmeat are kind of metaphors for the fact that this issue is going on, has been going on since the dawn of time. And if you want to say it, it's not just in black culture, and it definitely is in black culture, but it's in other cultures as well. Like as I said, the founding fathers had duels over getting insulted or honor and whatever, and that's the same idea. We kill each other and over petty things. And the whole thing about Riley throwing the chair, once again, it's a metaphor for how people are so easily controlled to behave, triggered to behave violently. So it's a good episode. It's very, very cerebral, and this also introduces Stinkmeaner into the series, because there are some characters like him that you can't do a one and done episode because they're so there's so much utilage you can get out of him. And they actually do 4 more episodes. Like obviously when Tom gets possessed by Stinkmeaner, then they do the Hatocracy where Stinkmeaner has 3 friends, and then after that, Stinkmeaner comes back, and then Robert becomes Super Saiyan Grandpa or whatever. So it's interesting. All right, that's all I gotta say about Granddad's fight. There are a bunch of talking points to that episode.